Welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell.
Susan, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
You know, I'm very happy today.
Why?
Because the weather is just incredible outside.
It's pretty perfect. My kids say it is cruising weather. We put down the windows, opened the sunroof, and we just sang at the top of our lungs.
I had the sunroof open on my car today coming in. It was like, wow, this
feels good.
Feels really good. I mean, anything beats 115, 118 degrees, which I don't really mind, but when it's like months and months at a time.
Drags, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you know, give us a break, right?
We have hit that sweet spot, though. We earned it,
yes.
And we're all going to enjoy it.
Speaking of cruising, I have a golf cart. I think you knew that.
I do know that.
This is the best season to be driving around. I mean, I drive that thing everywhere.
Where do you take your golf cart?
Grocery store, for instance. My wife went and got a petty, what do you call it, a mani-pedi. She took the golf cart to the mani-pedi place.
Are there parking spots specifically for golf carts where you live?
At some places there are, yes. So there's like a golf club, and it's like all little tiny little spots, obviously for golf carts.
I feel like you are like getting ready to announce your retirement or something to me. This sounds like you're already living in a retirement community.
Susan, I have an announcement to make right now.
Don't leave me. No.
And I am not retiring.
Okay, good.
Okay,
Good.
so yeah, don't put that out there.
Okay.
But, you know, talking about beautiful weather and a great season it is right now, there's another season going on. We're talking about open enrollment season. I always kind of start biting my nails around here when it comes to open enrollment, because you want to make sure you make the right decision, because once you sign off, you check all those boxes, you're locked in.
Yeah, you are locked in. And it's a lot of choices to make in some cases, you know, depending on what your employer or the government has for you to choose.
Right.
You know, there are a ton of options.
Right. And, you know, I hear of other people, like they sign off and everything, and then like they get 2 or 3 months into it, and they're like, oh, I should have chose the XYZ policy instead of this policy.
And then you have to wait and wait. And every time a bill comes up or something, you go, man.
Yeah, that's true. I got the wrong, policy, whatever. So
let's make the right choices.
We are going to be talking to Darin Reeser. He's with Securian Financial. And Darin, you're going to help us and our listeners make the right decisions for open enrollment, right?
That's the goal. I'll do my best.
That is the goal. Okay. So tell us a little bit about Securian Financial, just so we know, just a brief synopsis. You guys are in the financial, obviously, and the insurance business. And you guys got a lot of customers out there.
We're the third largest group insurance life carrier in the country. So we have multifaceted divisions, though, but primarily a group life insurance and group benefits, supplemental health. We have financial planner division. We have other independent agencies, but really broad, 150-year-old St. Paul, Minnesota-based company.
So let's just let's dive into it and talk a little bit about health insurance. I think the biggest goal for people when they sign up is they just want the cheapest policy or the cheapest rate, but that's not always the best route, correct?
Sure thing. Yeah, it's important for you to look at your family. And if you have the luxury of using your employer's tools, a lot of major medical carriers now have educational tools that will look back at last year's snapshot of what your pharmaceutical spend was, where your medical claims were. You can break it down by dependents, which one of your family members used the claims and what. And so really look at what were the total of those claims and do the math. And figure out how much did I spend out of pocket, and put that together then with how much did I spend on premium. And at open enrollments, our opportunity to look at those things and say, geez, I really didn't go to the doctor last year, but our nature is to defer to that really rich, really expensive medical plan because we feel like that's best. Right? We feel like, well, the less exposure I have, the better that is. But if you're paying a lot of premium for something that you're not using, that's an example of maybe you're in the wrong plan. So this is that time of year.
Yeah, let's kind of clarify that. If you are not going to the doctor on a regular basis, or you don't have a chronic illness, and you barely even see a physician, I'm assuming that maybe a high deductible would be better for that person as opposed to somebody who has a chronic illness or a disease, or they just find themselves getting ill all the time.
Absolutely. And so often the consumer-driven medical plans, and then some of those funds that are available, the health savings account might be a way to make sure that you put some money aside, though, if you had a real high deductible plan that was less expensive because you're generally healthy. But this might be an opportunity for you to make sure that if something did happen, you have money in that health savings account that you can use to pay for some of those out-of-pocket expenses.
Let's talk a little bit about HSAs and FSAs, because I think there are a lot of rules that make people a little bit worried about opting into a plan, or they're not sure if they're going to be able to use their money or what happens to that. What's the quick overview that people need to keep in mind when they are looking at those potential plans?
So depending on the major medical plan you're on first, that's a qualifier. So you'd have to be on a true consumer-driven medical plan to get access to an HSA or health savings account. Health savings account, though, you own that forever. So that money goes in. If you don't spend it this year, it continues to grow as you're making contributions to that in the future. Where flexible savings account, or flexible spending account rather, which is the one I think you're mentioning as well, is the use it or lose it account. So you put in a certain amount that you allocate for the year. If you don't use that, you've got a little bit of carryover at the end of the year, but then that money's gone. So you want to be very particular about how much money you allocate to that flexible spending account.
HSA rolls over. The flexible spending account does not roll over, and you have to use it or lose it, as you had indicated.
And the FSA can be for things like there's a child care FSA, things like that too. So it's not, there are different options even within that little umbrella. I know my family is very thankful for the FSA for child care, and the limits, I would love it if the limits were a little bit higher, because we blow through the limit pretty early on in the school year.
Right. And real briefly for our listeners out there who may have kids. So how does that work for Susan then? The money comes out before taxes, right?
Money comes out before taxes, and then depending on what your school's plan is, you pay in advance and then you get the refund, or they just determine, the balance. So
but it's helpful though, right?
It's super helpful when you're not, it's $5,000 limit.
Wow.
So it's $5,000. It's not taxed.
Wow. That's okay.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it is a good deal. Hey, Darin, let's jump to what some benefits are out there that maybe people are not paying attention to, or they just kind of skip over because they think it doesn't affect them. What are some of the benefits out there that people seem to skip over?
Yeah, interesting. I think there's two things that people often overlook: life insurance and supplemental health. And when we go to open enrollment, often we're thinking very transactional, right? I'm going to pick the plan. I'm going to pick my contribution for the HSA or the FSA, as you mentioned. But life insurance and supplemental health benefits are another way that you can actually manage your financial future and protect your financial future. And I don't think people actively think about those products. So it's something I really encourage everybody to take a look at this year.
Life insurance is one of those things that can be a hard conversation, and any kind of insurance, you can trick yourself into thinking, maybe I don't need this right now, or I can hold off because the budget is super tight, right? Like, I think that's why there are so many people who haven't explored it yet.
Right. If you're young, let's say you're 25, do you find a lot of people out there are like, I'm so young, I don't need it, and then, maybe they do wind up needing it?
Absolutely. So I think that is a misnomer. You're right. If you're young, you may have student loan debt. You may have credit card debt. You may have a car loan. You may even have a mortgage already. But if you have any kind of financial obligation that you don't want it, because you don't have maybe a family or children or other dependents, you don't want to leave those financial obligations with your family. Other thing about life insurance is the sooner you buy it, it's based on your age at the time you purchase it, right? So the sooner you can buy that life insurance, the less expensive it will be.
Hey, real quickly, I know a lot of people get this in the mail and they don't know how to read it because they don't really understand it. And I'm going off track a little bit here, but term insurance, what is term insurance and what are the pros and cons with that?
So term insurance, think of renting it, for as opposed to owning it. Term insurance, you would buy a policy with a specific death benefit or a face amount of that policy for the specific term. And so for 10 years or for 20 years or for 30 years. And so you think if you are thinking forward, you're like, well, my kids will be grown in 20 years from now and my mortgage will be paid for. Maybe I don't need this large life insurance benefit anymore. So you might want to buy a term policy to cover that specific term during your working years where you have the most amount of obligations at risk. And the premium's the same for that term. And when that term's over, you can re-up for another term. You can let it go. You've got a lot of options to consider.
When you sign up for that, though, if you are still on this planet, which hopefully you are, do you get any of that contribution back that you put in over, say, 10 or 20 years?
For term insurance, no. So a permanent policy, there's whole life policies, there's universal life policies that are available. Those where you have a permanent, and we say permanent because there's a permanent premium. And some of those policies also would develop or build cash value over time as well. So those are something you might want, if you have access to a financial planner, someone do a little more research about that. Premiums will be a little higher because they're for the whole of your life. But by the same token, there is a savings component that's built into those, and you get some of that. You could access some of that as policy owner. You could pull that out as a policy loan, but there's things that not available as far as term insurance.
Just to clarify, if you're 30 years old and you buy insurance for 20 years, term insurance, do you keep your 30-year-old rate for that entire time, or does it go up year by year?
Unfortunately, the rate will change when the 20-year policy runs out. So if you're 30 and you bought a 20-year policy, the rate is the same, the death benefit's the same for that entire 20-year term. At the end of the 20 years, if you still want that death benefit, you have to pay based on being 50 years old. So the premium will be adjusted based on your health condition at the time. It's all the other variables that go into, just like a new policy.
It's like starting all over again.
How common is it for employers to offer life insurance as part of a package of benefits?
It's quite common, actually. LIMRA, a research marketing arm that studies the insurance industry, says that more people have life insurance through their employer than they have individual policies. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, it's just the convenience of knowing that your employer's already vetted that out. There's a lot of things to think about as you're looking at these life insurance companies and the policies. And so your employer's already vetted that out. But getting it through your employer, it's also going to be offered on a group basis. So you'll have guaranteed issue components where you don't have to answer health questions. You'll be able to get payroll deduction. In some cases, you can pre-tax some of those premiums. So there are some advantages for buying that through your employer.
Are there disadvantages to using an employer only? I mean, I know that our employer has a certain life insurance benefit, but I believe it's a pretty limited.
Is it one time your salary?
I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be one of the disadvantages for sure, because if you needed more insurance, then you would want to look to get outside of that. Or often many employers have a buy-up, for lack of a better phrase, where you could buy more over and above what that group term amount is provided. But CNN has said in a recent study that 10 times your annual salary is a good starting point as far as that final death benefit. So if you made $50,000 a year, you'd want to be considering a $500,000 policy.
Yeah,
that's an interesting rule of thumb. It's important, I think, to have the number in your mind.
Yeah,
because I think you can get overwhelmed.
Yeah, you're right, and that is a good rule of thumb. And just so you know, Susan, I think we can upgrade on our life insurance here. Like if you want more than one time your salary, you can buy up. So for open enrollment, keep that in mind.
I know. That's one of those choices we were chatting about. My goodness.
Hey, there's another benefit out there that people don't understand. Hospital indemnity plans. How does that work, and do you recommend that?
Absolutely do recommend it. So you think about major medical insurance. Major medical insurance pays doctors and hospitals. But we still have expenses, as we were talking about major medical earlier, about deductibles, co-insurance, out-of-pocket expenses. And for example, if you had there's three types of supplemental health benefits. Hospital indemnity is one of those. The hospital indemnity plan specifically is if you're admitted to the hospital for any reason, it'll pay a specified amount for the first day you're admitted, and it'll pay a daily benefit thereafter. But it's not just for hospital admissions, like if you were admitted for COVID, right, during the pandemic, or if you were in a car accident. Hospital indemnity also provides benefits for someone if you were going to have an elective surgery and be admitted to the hospital. If you're going to deliver a baby, it'll help offset those labor and delivery charges. So there's a lot of different advantages for those supplemental health benefits that will pay or help offset that money that you're responsible for deductibles, co-insurance, et cetera. And those policies pay directly to you.
Yeah, and the money, that's a good point, because the money goes directly, like you said, to you, and it doesn't pay medical bills or the hospital bills. It goes to you to help maybe pay for the time you missed from work or whatever. I mean, some plans start off with, if you're in there for 1 day in the hospital, it pays $1,000, and then for every day after that, it's like $100. So if you're in there for 3 days, it's like $1,200 or $1,300. I'm trying to do the math in my head. This is why I'm not.
You did a good job.
This is why this is why I'm not an accountant. But all right. So, but you would recommend the hospital indemnity plans in?
Well, that, and then the other two policies are accident plans and critical illness. So those kind of cover the gamut of what your out-of-pocket medical expenses might be. And I think they're worth looking at. Accident plans, think about if you had your kids are playing soccer and they fracture their arm, they go to the emergency room, they've got diagnostic testing, you got x-rays, you got medical supplies, you get a cast, all those out-of-pocket expenses. That'd be a good example of what an accident plan would help you pay. So all those things, we've all taken kids to the emergency room, those that have kids, at some point or other. A critical illness plan is for those that are really concerned about catastrophic medical events, critical illnesses in that sense. So a cancer diagnosis, heart attack, stroke, end-stage renal failure, all significant expenses that if you were on a consumer-driven medical plan, for example, would be a really tough time for you to offset those expenses. So depending on what your family history is, your medical history, depending on where your concerns are, think about, based on your medical plan, if something happened to me today and I had to pay my full deductible or my out-of-pocket max, could I afford that? And if the answer is no, and it is for more than 60% of Americans, if the answer is no, then a supplemental health product might be something for you to look at to make sure you can protect your financial future in the event something like that happened.
Hey, can we go back to the example that you brought up with your child who breaks a bone playing soccer or whatever, and you do have accidental insurance because he broke his bone on accident, right? But what happens if you also have health insurance or medical insurance? So what pays what? What goes first? Does it act as a supplemental? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a good point. So these products would be considered supplemental, and they're paid directly to you, and they don't coordinate with the major medical insurance at all. So major medical is going to pay, depending on the health insurance plan that you're on, it's going to pay what it's designed to pay. There may be a deductible that you pay. So if you had a $1,000 deductible, you're responsible for that first $1,000. And then there's a co-insurance component. 80% is usually what major medical carrier will pay next, and you'll pay the 20% up to a certain amount. Supplemental health doesn't care about that. There's a schedule of benefits, and so there's a dedicated amount for each one of the events that you can imagine. So much for an x-ray, so much for diagnostic testing, doctor visits, fractures. There's a dedicated amount that's in the policy that's already predetermined, and it'll tell you exactly what you get paid for that event to help. Then you can use the money again however you see fit.
Wow, so it kind of acts as an indemnity plan then, kind of?
It is an indemnity product, yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm learning something every day.
That's why we do this podcast.
All right. Listen, are you ready for your open enrollment, Susan?
I am way more prepared now. We've done a lot of podcasts that make me feel, like a grown up. And now that I'm married and have 2 children, of course I'm a grown up.
Yes.
But this one was like the most adulting conversation we've had in a long time.
It makes you, it opens your eyes,
does.
and makes you want to make the right choices. Hey, Darin, if people want to find out more about you, or they want to find out more about Securian, are any websites or social media accounts you want to get out there?
Yep, www.securian.com.
All right, sounds good. Thanks so much for being on the On Your Side podcast. I think I'm a lot smarter, and Susan is always smarter than I am, so that goes unspoken. And Darin, we'll have you back on sometime in the future then, okay?
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks. The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton, and I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can. Send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock, and every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.